2,500 years of rigorous moral philosophy has yet to produce a baseline consensus on the nature of right and wrong. Even among experts, the most basic premises of ethics remain a subject of active dispute. The instrument used to measure these problems carries a structural limitation that overrides the sheer volume of intellectual effort directed at them. The human mind operates within the boundaries of an internal reality. In a literal sense, consciousness functions like a sealed room, having never directly touched the physical world existing outside its own container. Information from the outside only enters this sealed space after being converted into translated, highly filtered geometric models. Reasoning about the external environment from within this sealed buffer introduces a specific margin of error into every moral calculation the mind attempts. The conscious mind functions as a finite bandwidth buffer. Because active thinking requires significant resources, it can consume the system's entire processing capacity. The brain manages this load through a suppression architecture, similar to a 3D rendering engine calling unseen geometry to save power. This calling process acts as a vital protective layer, preventing the system from collapsing under total sensory overstimulation. Under high cognitive load, this mechanism categorizes interoceptive signals, the body's continuous read of its environment, as background noise. These signals are suppressed before they can reach conscious awareness. A thought formed in a fraction of a second can override biological sensory data that took millions of years to calibrate. A single act of will, such as speaking the word no, effectively discards the body's physical readings in favor of the mind's internal logic. Overthinking triggers a systemic deletion of the most extensively calibrated data available to the human system. While the mind is sealed away, the body remains physically integrated with its surroundings. It functions as an instance of external reality, rather than a mere observer of it. This is a state of structural isomorphism. Because the body is built from the same physics and chemistry as the field it occupies, it can read that field through direct physical contact. This architecture was selected through 4.3 billion years of continuous iteration against the material world. The evolutionary filter removes every configuration that misreads its environment. Any biological boundary failing to accurately map threats ended its lineage. Surviving systems map reality's underlying structural requirements. The physical body acts as a calibrated instrument for reading the moral field, which we can define as the set of conditions that permit continued existence. These interoceptive signals provide data on how a system aligns with the external field, making them a source of objective information rather than subjective theory. This calibration does not measure survival in a simple, competitive sense. A framework based only on staying alive would classify cancer and parasites as successful moral actors. Instead, the body measures viability, the capacity of a system to continuously generate stable future states across time and different scales. We distinguish two trajectories. The top line is contiguous infinity, unbroken linear accumulation that eventually consumes its host, like cancer triggering systemic collapse. The bottom represents continuous infinity. Individual components die, but the system never loses its capacity to generate its next state. In this framework, morality functions as a gradient measuring a system's movement toward this long-term viability. Objective ethics identifies actions that preserve a pattern's capacity to continue, while classifying short-term extraction as a failure of system integrity. The history of Western thought is heavily influenced by the work of René Descartes, who established a specific hierarchy of knowledge. Descartes' method relied on the internal, thinking subject as the absolute certainty for any investigation. This approach treated the physical body as an uncertain external vessel to be viewed with skepticism. This hierarchy places the most weight on the least reliable component. The mind is the component most isolated from the environment, while the body is the component most continuous with it. Philosophy developed sophisticated conceptual rulers for understanding the world, but handed them to an internal reader structurally sealed off from the data. Prioritizing the mind's internal models over the body's physical feedback disables the primary instrument used to perceive objective reality. Consciousness did not build the human body. It began using it after the system was already fully functional. Declaring possessive ownership over the body as an identity is an ego-driven choice, rather than a philosophical requirement. When the self identifies with the instrument's accuracy begins to degrade. This grid maps systemic benefit against active will. A corrupted instrument prioritizes localized preservation over the true moral coordinate. This produces a perceptual inversion. Extraction feels like strength, and systemic service is interpreted as a burden. This distortion represents a form of systemic interference, where the reader's attachment to the instrument contaminates the measurement. Treating the body as an identity leads to rationalized extraction. Treating it as an external tool produces clear readings of the environment. Once stripped of their specific cultural contexts, the world's most rigorous contemplative traditions all encode the same technical protocol. Plato provided the instruction to turn away from the internal shadows of the cave. The Stoics used the practice of prosoche to maintain objective, continuous attention. These same principles appear in the Eastern frameworks of Buddhist Vipassana and Zen Zazen. These distinct practices function as protocols for suspending the analytical layer, allowing the body to be used as an external instrument. To read the coordinates of reality accurately, the mind must reach a state of stillness, allowing the instrument to read the external field directly. Understanding is the ruler you use, but wisdom is the practice of holding that ruler completely separate from the self.